Welcome to Starbound, where every star tells a story. Today, can a plea for help echo across the cosmos and change the fate of an entire civilization? Let's get into the story. The Breathari transmission echoed over the bridge of the HMS Invincible, its words raw with desperation. The Breathari call for aid. Tyrants, Prekon, risk of destruction. Please help us. Admiral Thomas Davies stared at the flickering holographic projection. The Breathari, unknown in this sector of the galaxy, seemed to resemble bipedal felines, slender and graceful, but now marred with the unmistakable aura of a dying civilization. He'd received his share of distress signals, most of them ending in blood and charred worlds. The memory of Tau Ceti III, a debacle that had cost the lives of his best soldiers, stabbed at him. "They sound desperate," his communications officer muttered, the man's youthful voice tight. Davies knew the cost of intervention all too well, yet the weight of the Breathari message settled on him like a lead shroud. To turn away, to ignore a plea, this dire gnawed at his sense of duty, his soldier's heart. "Open a channel," he commanded, his voice gruff. "This is Admiral Davies of the United Terran Alliance. We received your transmission. We are coming." The bridge erupted in a flurry of activity. He felt the pulse of purpose coursing through his ship, a mirror of his own determination. This time it would be different. They were battle-hardened, not the greenhorns of a decade ago. They were older, wiser, and fueled by the memory of past failures. "Plot a course," he said to his navigation officer. "We enter the system on the edge, silent running." Stealth was their first line of defense, a hard-won lesson. They'd learned the art of silent approach, of becoming the shadow before the strike. Davies studied the transmission data with a strategist's eye. They mentioned a planet. A name, perhaps? The comms officer scrambled. "Running translation algorithms now, Admiral. Their language is exotic. The Breathari had been advanced enough for interstellar communication, but under siege, their transmissions were clipped, frantic. Technology suffered under the hammer of war." With mounting tension, Davies looked towards the system map, now populated with a single besieged world. "There," an ensign pointed. "The system's labeled. Fourth planet's name is Relixis." Relixis. A strange name rolling awkwardly off a human tongue. It now hung in the air, pregnant with the weight of a civilization on the precipice. "Get me everything you can on Relixis." Davies turned to his tactical officer. "Pull up any astronomical data, scan for troop concentrations, Prekon fleet positions." Before the order was completed, the sensors lit up. "Incoming jump signature," the sensor tech yelled. "Multiple ships, big ones, origin point within the system. They're not coming from outside." The crew exchanged worried glances. Were they too late? Suddenly, Davies focused on a comm officer's station. "Sir, we got a clear Breathari transmission." The man scrambled to play it. A face filled the screen, furred, wide-eyed, and trembling slightly. We didn't think anyone... Thank you." It cut off, replaced by a scene of chaos, explosions blooming in a city skyline. "The Prekon! They've landed forces! They're hunting us!" Davies clenched his jaw. "Benjamin!" he barked. His right-hand man, Colonel Benjamin Watson, stood at attention. "Assemble your best. We're going in." Benjamin Ben Watson thrived in chaos. Battle plans were his poetry, the battlefield his canvas. His gruff voice set his soldiers in motion, hand-picked Marines hardened by countless campaigns. They moved like a well-oiled machine, donning combat suits in the cramped armory of the Invincible. His gaze met Davies's across the commotion. The Admiral's eyes held an intensity Watson knew well, not just the steely resolve of battle, but the shadow of a man haunted by ghosts. "We play this smart, Ben," Davies said. "We don't know these Prekon, their tactics, their numbers." "Shock and awe, sir?" Watson offered, a knowing grin flickering across his face. It had been their saving grace before. The Admiral sighed, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "Not unless strictly necessary. Deception first. We land unseen, find survivors, learn the layout." Watson turned towards his comm station. "Lieutenant, prep the dropships. I want cloaking systems operational and sensor disruptors online. If those Prekon bastards see us coming, this rescue turns into a massacre." The ship shuddered as it exited the hyperspace jump, the harsh light of an alien star flooding the bridge. "System layout matches the signal," Davies muttered. Relixis hung eerily before them, the Breathari city scarred by battle. "Sir, enemy ships!" A tactical officer pointed at the fleet orbiting the ruined planet, a collection of hulking dreadnoughts. Davies zoomed in, noting the strange organic architecture of the vessels. "Those are no ships I recognize," he grunted. Then his eyes landed on the planet below. "There, landing zones on the outskirts. Begin descent trajectory." Watson rallied his troops, a final battle cry. "Remember, boys, we're ghosts out there. Until we know what we're up against, we make no sound, draw no blood." The dropships peeled away from the Invincible, slipping towards the unsuspecting planet, silent, invisible hunters in the night. The planet's surface rushed up at them like the gaping maw of a beast. The dropships cut their engines at the last moment, landing on repulsor lifts with barely a whisper. The air shimmered as the cloaking systems flickered off, revealing a wasteland. Charred buildings jutted into the sky like skeletal fingers, debris-filled streets the only testament to the vibrant city this must have once been. Watson's comms crackled. Teams Alpha and Charlie report in. Negative contacts. The place is a graveyard. Not for long, Watson muttered under his breath. Every instinct screamed that the silence was a trap, the calm before a storm that would make them long for the predictable brutality of Tau Ceti 3. "Spread out, find survivors," he ordered his men. "Sensor sweeps every 5 minutes, eyes on our trackers." The Marines dispersed, their armored forms dissolving into the shadows of the ravaged cityscape. Watson crouched low, his bio-enhanced senses on high alert. The scent of burnt ozone mixed with something foul, a metallic tang he couldn't place. They were not alone. A shadow shifted ahead, a flicker near a pile of rubble. His rifle snapped up. "Identify yourself!" A lithe form emerged, hands raised, and Watson was face to face with his first glimpse of a Breathari. Fur the color of moonlit snow framed a face frozen in a mixture of fear and desperate hope. It's you. You've come." "Easy," Watson ordered, lowering his rifle slightly but not relaxing. The Breathari was unarmed, dressed in civilian garb that hung loosely on its emaciated frame. "Where are the others?" "The tunnels," the Breathari gestured with a trembling paw. "Below the streets. That's where we hide. Where they hunt us." "They?" Watson pressed. "How many? How armed? And who the hell are they?" The Breathari's eyes, large and luminous, brimmed with barely contained terror. "The Prekan. Conquerors. Slavers." Its voice quivered as it struggled to form the words. "Brutal. Strong. They took our cities, our families." Watson nodded, his battle instincts now firing. The Prekan were the enemy, their crimes now vividly colored in his mind. "Take me to the tunnels. How many of your people are left?" The Breathari hesitated, fear flickering in its eyes. "Not many. They have been hunting us." Cold rage filled Watson, the ghosts of Tau Ceti 3 resurfacing. "All the more reason to get you out of here." The tunnels were a subterranean labyrinth, a damp and claustrophobic maze. The Breathari moved with surprising swiftness, its slender form navigating the darkness with ease. Fear hung heavy in the air, whispers echoing off the rough-hewn walls. Suddenly, a muffled shriek pierced the silence, quickly cut short. Watson whirled, weapon ready. The Breathari whimpered. "Ahead," it whispered. "They have found more of us." Watson peered around a corner, catching a glimpse of heavily armored figures dragging struggling Breathari back into the darkness. They were massive, at least 2 meters tall, clad in gleaming armor that pulsed with a bioluminescent light. The word brutal didn't do them justice. These were walking tanks. He gestured to his team. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but the image of those innocents being dragged away fueled him. He had a plan, desperate but audacious. "Here's what we do," he outlined to his men in hushed tones. It was risky, it was crazy, but it might just work. "Divide and disrupt," Watson hissed to his team. "Alpha, you create a diversion, something loud, something fiery over there." He pointed further down the tunnel. "Charlie, use the sensor disruptors, mask their scanners. I'll take Bravo and strike at the heart of this hunting party. Remember, speed is key." A wave of grim nods was his reply. Alpha split off, disappearing deeper into the tunnels. A flicker of movement, a calculated toss, and a muffled explosion echoed a moment later, followed by shouts and the thud of heavy boots. Charlie slipped into position, the whine of the disruptors cutting through the tense silence, scrambling the Precon sensors. Watson, followed closely by Bravo, gripped his rifle and moved like a shadow. The Breathari guide had stopped, pointing ahead. 3 hulking Precon warriors blocked a passage, their glowing eyes sweeping over a huddled group of terrified civilians. The image ignited a cold-blooded fury in Watson. There was only one way out of this, and it was through them. "Now!" he barked. Bravo team erupted from concealment, weapons firing. The surprise was total. The first Precon was taken down immediately, its armor no match for concentrated blaster fire. The other 2 roared, their massive forms now liabilities in the confined space. Watson dodged a clumsy strike, his combat knife sinking into a seam of the Precon armor. The fight was a blur of chaos screams, gunfire, and the stench of fear and alien biology. But the humans were trained for chaos, born into it, and within minutes it was done. Seared Precon bodies lay sprawled among the rescued Breathari, who whimpered and cowered, utterly terrified. Watson holstered his weapon, his heart pounding an echo of the battle. "Get these civilians back to the dropships," he ordered, his voice tight. "This was just a taste. The real fight is coming." Back at the landing site, Watson felt the ground practically rumble under his boots. He stared back towards the city where the outline of Precon dreadnoughts had shifted. They were closing in, alerted by the skirmish in the tunnels. "Sir, Admiral Davies is hailing." His second, Lieutenant Reyes, handed him a communicator. "Patch it through," he barked. Davies' face, creased with worry, flickered onto a holographic screen. "Report, Watson. Did you find survivors?" "We did, sir. But the situation is worse than we thought. Precon ground forces are numerous, heavy armor, likely bioengineered warriors. We're prepping evac." Davies looked grim. "I'm sending in the Raptor Squadron for air support. Be warned, orbital bombardment may be an option if Precon numbers overwhelm you." Watson grimaced but nodded. Orbital strikes meant turning this world into a moonscape, but he understood the grim necessity. Better to leave nothing for the Precon than sacrifice more lives. He turned to Reyes. "Start cycling civilians to the dropships, women and children first. Get everyone back to the Invincible. I'll hold the perimeter." The next hours became a blur. His Marines, bolstered by the orbiting Raptors engaging Precon fighters, transformed the landing zone into a fortified fire base. The thrum of dropship engines filled the air, ferrying the surviving Breathari to safety. Watson stood at the edge of the makeshift camp, eyes fixed on the ravaged city skyline, now pulsating with enemy movement. With every sweep of his visor's targeting system, he counted more Precon troops converging. They were being cornered, but every Marine was worth 10 of those lumbering brutes, so long as surprise was on their side. Sir, last dropship inbound," Reyes shouted over the din. Watson nodded, a grim satisfaction hardening his gaze. They'd done it, saved what was left of an entire civilization. Now came the hard part, getting his people out alive. "Davies," he voxed, a tactical map flickering before him. "We've secured the primary objective and are initiating exfil. Precon ground forces are closing in hard." "Copy that, Watson. Raptor Squadron will begin suppression fire. I want you back here in one piece." "Understood." Watson felt the familiar warmth of Davies' gruff paternalism beneath the order. "Understood, Admiral. We'll have a welcome party ready." He switched channels, barking commands for a synchronized withdrawal, drawing the Precon into a trap of their own making. The Raptors screeched overhead, unleashing a torrent of missiles and laser strikes. The ground ahead of the advancing Precon erupted in flames, sending shockwaves through the alien ranks. Confusion replaced their brutal march, buying precious time for the remaining Marines to fall back to a predetermined choke point. Watson and Reyes, covering the rear, planted detonators as they moved, laying down a string of explosive surprises for the pursuing Precon forces. The city, already a testament to the horrors of war, would now become their tactical playground. "Alpha and Charlie teams fall back to secondary perimeter. Bravo, covering fire until they're clear," Watson ordered, his voice echoing in his helmet. "Then we light this place up real good." The roar of the Precon was now deafening. Strange howls filled the air as they recklessly poured through the burning wreckage towards their prey. The humans made them pay for every meter, each calculated explosion felling more of the imposing figures. Watson crouched behind the crumbling remnants of a statue, triggered the final sequence of detonations. Buildings collapsed, engulfing the charging Brecken in plumes of fire and dust. The shockwave knocked him off his feet. Coughing, eyes burning, he blinked away the debris. The Brecken had been halted, providing the final window they needed. "Run!" he yelled, and run they did. Every Marine was battle-worn, streaked with grime and alien blood, but their spirits were lifted by defiance as they sprinted back to the waiting dropships. Aboard the Invincible, the bridge hummed with a frantic energy mirroring the chaos below. Navigation plotted escape vectors, engines roared, and tactical officers barked coordinates as Raptor pilots engaged with what appeared to be the bulk of the Brecken fleet. In the center of it all, Admiral Davies watched the battle unfold, his weathered face a mask of grim determination. "Status report," he snapped at his comm officer. "Watson's teams are en route. Admiral, heavy pursuit? It's a close one." On a giant view screen, Davies witnessed the final mad dash of the ground troops. They were like ants against a swarm, dodging bursts of Brecken plasma fire. The Raptors swooped in, suicidal in their desperation, disrupting the enemy enough for the dropships to lift off. Relief flooded him as one by one they vanished in miniature flashes of hyperspace jumps. But one remained. "Watson's still planet-side," Davies growled. Time stretched thin. The Raptor squadron was decimated, buying their comrades those crucial seconds with their lives. The last dropship clung to the ravaged surface of Relixis. On board, Watson leaned out of the open bay, weapon blazing as he provided covering fire. Reyes, next to him, was a whirlwind of controlled violence. His orders barked above the din of combat. Suddenly, a Brecken projectile grazed the dropship's hull. Its engines sputtered. "No!" Watson's heart sank. Reyes shouted coordinates into his comm unit, their pre-calculated emergency landing zone. Back on the bridge, Davies swore. "Change of plans. Reroute the Invincible. Full power. I want a pickup window for that dropship." Chaos erupted. The Invincible was a dreadnought, not a nimble rescue ship, and entering the atmosphere was a gamble. But Davies stared down at the unfolding drama, the dropship limping over the scarred landscape, the pursuing Brecken like a wave of monstrous insects. That was his team down there. There was no other choice. Inside the stricken dropship, desperation edged into panic. "We're losing altitude," the pilot yelled over the comms, fighting the failing controls. On the ground, Watson watched the ship lurch precariously, leaving a trail of black smoke. They wouldn't make the pickup zone. His stomach twisted. "New landing coordinates, here!" Reyes barked, thrusting a location marker into Watson's hand. It showed a desolate crater, far from their planned exfiltration point, surrounded by crumbling structures. "That's a suicide run, Lieutenant!" one of the Marines shouted. "It's our only chance," Watson growled. "Now move." They piled out, the wounded supported by the able, and dashed across the pockmarked wastelands. Brecken fire seared the ground behind them, forcing them to zigzag, taking cover among the ruins. Each detonation felt like a fist slamming into Watson's gut. Those were his men they were targeting, his decisions putting them in harm's way. Reaching the crater, he surveyed the bleak landscape. Its only advantage was the broken terrain to use as cover. "Defensive formations," he ordered. His team formed a tight perimeter around the drop zone, weapons sweeping the approaching swarm of Brecken. He toggled his comm. "Davies, this is Watson. We're down, holding position for pickup. Make it quick." "We're inbound." Davies' voice crackled over the channel. Relief momentarily washed over Watson, quickly replaced by grim determination. It was going to be one hell of a fight. The Invincible loomed overhead, blotting out the sun, a steel behemoth descending from the heavens. Watson marveled at the audacity, the sheer madness of it. But this was humanity, he realized. This was the brotherhood he fought for. This was what separated them from the faceless enemy, this loyalty, this unbreakable will to leave no one behind. The Invincible shuddered as it breached the atmosphere, an apocalyptic leviathan framed in flames. Brecken fighters buzzed around it like angry wasps, but concentrated fire from its immense cannons kept them at bay. On the bridge, Davies clenched the armrest until his knuckles turned white. "Deploy landing gear. Minimum altitude hold." Every screen flickered with battle data. His tactical officer relayed the desperate struggle below. "Watson surrounded, Admiral. Brecken wave attacks incoming." He felt a tremor as the ship's engines strained, pushing the limits of what a dreadnought was built to endure. Every blast that rocked the hull was a twist of the knife. His gambit might cost them dearly. Suddenly, the dropship appeared below, a valiant speck against a sea of hostiles. It touched down, kicking up dust. Watson's team formed a ring of fire, cutting into the Brecken ranks. The hatch slammed open, a desperate beacon. "All Marines to the dropship now." Watson's voice was raw with urgency. They ran. Wounded were dragged, comrades carried fallen brothers. Every heart-pounding step was a defiance of their overwhelming enemy. Each Marine that crossed the threshold was a victory in itself. Watson was last. He stood at the edge of the crater, his rifle a blur, holding the line as Reyes dashed inside. Then, a bolt of pure energy sliced through his left shoulder. He staggered but kept firing. Reyes reached out, hauling him aboard just as the hatch hissed shut. "Lift off," Watson rasped, slumping against the bulkhead. The dropship surged upwards, leaving the seething mass of Brecken below. He watched the ground recede, his vision blurring. The pain was a fire coursing through his arm, but it was drowned by a wave of bittersweet triumph. Aboard the Invincible, in the tense hush of the bridge, Davies let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Welcome home, son," he muttered, the corner of his mouth twitching into a tired smile. The war wasn't over. They'd lost ships, lost good people, and only repelled the vanguard of a ruthless enemy. But for now, in the med bay as doctors fussed over battered Marines, in the echoes of cheers and the exhausted grins of warriors who defied death, the humans had won the day. In the aftermath, the surviving Breathari found sanctuary aboard the Invincible. Davies himself met with their leaders, the weariness in their eyes replaced by a spark of renewed hope. His scientists pored over their data, deciphering the Breathari language, understanding their history, their culture. They learned of sprawling cities and peaceful philosophies, now shattered by the Brecken onslaught. Human engineers, with surprising input from the Breathari, began to modify their ships, repurposing space not for weapons, but for refugees. They were warriors, yes, but also builders, creators, forever marked by the ghosts of their past failures. This time, things would be different. Watson, his arm in a sling, joined Davies in the observation deck. They looked out towards Relixis, a wounded planet, a symbol of both brutality and the unyielding defiance of the human spirit. "The Brecken won't stop, Admiral," Watson said, his voice quiet. "They'll chase these survivors, and they'll likely find us too." Davies nodded. "That's why we won't hide. We will rally allies. We'll uncover the Brecken homeworld. And we'll strike back, not in vengeance, but in defense of those who cannot defend themselves." Watson looked at his commander, saw the hardened glint in his eyes. This wasn't just about saving one doomed species. This was a declaration, humanity stepping off the sidelines and into the vast dangers of the galaxy. "And when we take the fight to them, Admiral," he said, a fierce grin spreading across his face, "I'd be honored to lead the ground assault." Davies chuckled. It was a grim sound, but carried the weight of a promise. "Get some rest, son. You've earned it. But make no mistake," he turned, his gaze piercing, "there will be another battle, and you'll lead the way." The war for Relixis had been won, but as the Invincible powered its engines, setting course towards the unknown depths of space, a new conflict had begun. And this time, humanity would not wait to be called for help. They would forge their own destiny in the fires of interstellar war. The hum of the Invincible was now a familiar lullaby, but the echoes of Relixis lingered. The Breathari survivors had settled in, finding solace in the repurposed cargo holds and hydroponic bays. Yet their gratitude was tempered with a quiet terror that mirrored the grim determination now fueling humankind. Davies was a man transformed, the weight of Relixis turning his weathered features to granite. Intelligence flowed in. Refugees from other conquered worlds, Breathari star charts, intercepted Brecken transmissions. They painted a chilling picture. The Brecken were not just conquerors, but slavers, their empire built on the broken backs of countless subjugated species. Watson, now healed, seethed with righteous fury as he pored over tactical data. "They're not soldiers, Admiral. They're butchers," he'd growled to Davies on the rare occasions of sleeplessness. It wasn't just the Invincible that shifted gears. Word spread like wildfire. The Brecken, the slaves, the defiant stand on Relixis. Public opinion on Earth, once wary of interstellar entanglement, swung hard. Aid flowed, scientists, engineers, old decommissioned vessels retrofitted for war. Humanity, with its knack for reinvention, was forging itself anew. Davies struck a delicate balance. He opened diplomatic channels, reaching out to races known only through trade rumors. Many cowered, fearing to draw the Precon ire. Some listened, recognizing the glint of old Earth in humanity's eyes, that stubbornness born from fighting their way, time and again, from the brink. A coalition was born, hesitant at first, more symbolic than practical. Yet, it was the shape of things to come. The Volcri, avian traders known for their cunning, offered intel networks and clandestine resupply routes. The insectoid Xylari, masters of cyber warfare, began to crack Precon encryption. Watson, promoted to colonel, was a whirlwind. He led joint training exercises, grueling simulations, hammering disparate races into a cohesive force. The Breathari, now armed and fueled by desperation, proved uncannily adept at asymmetrical warfare. He grumbled under his breath, a testament to the twisted respect for the enemy that now festered in his soldier's heart. The day came when Davies unveiled the plan. Not a rescue mission, not just a counterstrike. This was a full-fledged offensive. Its scope and audacity echoed across the bridge. Target: a Precon munitions hub in the Malkari system. It fed their war machine, and its destruction would buy them time. Time to prepare, to turn the coalition into a true fighting force, to break the chain of Precon conquest. "This is where we go from haunted to hunters," Davies had told them, his eyes, haunted by Relixis, now burned with hard purpose. The approach to Malkari was tense, filled with a silence heavier than vacuum. They'd become ghosts again, cloaking tech pushed to its limits, whispers instead of comms. The Invincible and its ragtag fleet human cruisers, Volcri scout ships, a Xylari dreadnought bristling with antennae, hung on the fringe of Precon-controlled space. Watson stood at the head of the drop ship, his marines strapped in, a diverse assemblage of fangs and scales, eyes all reflecting his own grim anticipation. "Remember," he barked, "no time for grand speeches. Relixis wasn't the nightmare. It was just the wake-up call." The Malkari munitions hub materialized on sensors, a gargantuan orb of industrial menace orbiting a barren world. Watson's visor streamed data Precon fighter patrols, defense grids, shield generators. Textbook tactics screamed to probe, to lure them out, to fight on their terms. But Watson had learned a different lesson on Relixis. "Davies," he voxed, a plan already crystallizing in his mind. "Need a distraction. A big one." The Admiral's reply was a grim chuckle. "Got a wild card up my sleeve, Colonel." Moments later on the Invincible's bridge, Davies keyed in a launch sequence. "Volunteer crew," he told his stunned officers. "Breathari mostly. Got a bone to pick." A lone drop ship, stripped down, engines hot-wired, shot from the hangar like a vengeful bullet. No IFF beacon, just a silent streak hurtling straight towards Malkari. "Sir?" An ensign dared the question. Davies stared at the suicidal path, his voice low. "It's called a battering ram, son. Now watch." The dropship didn't slow. It hurtled past bewildered Precon fighters, straight into a shield generator station. The explosion lit up the comm channels, a brilliant starburst momentarily blinding sensors. And in the chaos that ensued, Watson's dropship struck. They breached the defensive perimeter like needles punching through rotten cloth, guided by Xylari cracked targeting systems. The Precon, used to lumbering battles of attrition, were caught off guard by the speed, the ferocity. Volcri ships darted through the melee, laying sensor mines, hacking communication grids. It wasn't a clean fight, not by the book. It was the fight of those with everything to lose. Watson's team hit the munitions stores. It was an inferno, detonating plasma cores, superheated metal raining down. But they'd done the drilling, the simulations. Every Marine knew their role, every Breathari moved with the desperate precision of the cornered. Plant the charges, clear the path, and get out. His comm crackled. "Watson, exfil and 2 mics. That battering ram of yours bought us time, not eternity." Davies' voice was laced with the strain of command. 2 mics, Watson acknowledged. Detonators armed, he triggered the countdown. The explosions began cascading through the facility, a symphony of defiance echoing across the Malkari system. Then, it was a race back to the dropships, back to the waiting coalition fleet, back into the black. On the return jump, the cheers in his ears couldn't drown out the ghosts. Marines who'd laughed hours ago were now silent bundles. Zelari ships were limping, Volkri reporting heavy casualties. Yet, as the Invincible reappeared above a relieved Earth, battered but defiantly unbowed, Watson knew the price of victory. But the Malkari raid was a signal flare, a testament not just to human bravery, but to the tinderbox of resentment the Prekun had created. More races emerged from the shadows, weary of living in fear. The coalition was now a gnarled fist, bloodied but growing stronger. Davies, in a public broadcast that rippled across the galaxy, spoke not as a warrior, but a protector. Images of Relixis, of Prekun's slave markets were seared onto every viewer's mind. We are humanity. We fought our own monsters. Now we fight yours. The war was far from over. The Prekun were brutal, adaptable, their empire vast. But in the bowels of the Invincible, in the shared training grounds, in the silent understanding between warrior races, something new was forged. Not an alliance of convenience, but one born in the fires of shared purpose. For humanity, this was their crucible. In the face of galactic tyranny, they would not merely survive, but reshape the rules of the game. And Colonel Watson, haunted by Relixis but fueled by Malkari, would be the vanguard of this transformation. News of Malkari reached the Prekun homeworld as a tremor, an impossible glitch in the ironclad system of their supremacy. Initial reports were dismissed. Pirates, a local insurrection, a mere nuisance. Then came the intelligence leaks, the intercepted transmissions, and the chilling realization. A disparate coalition was rising, held together by an infuriatingly resilient species called humans. The Prekun war machine, honed over centuries of crushing, unyielding worlds, began a slow, ponderous shift. Supply lines tightened, reserve fleets were mobilized, but beneath the calculated responses, there was a flicker of something the Prekun had long forgotten. Uncertainty. Their foes were unpredictable, recklessly cunning, fueled by a desperation the Prekun could not comprehend. On the Invincible's bridge, Davies studied the strategic projections with a mix of grim satisfaction and worry. Battles raged on countless fronts, but the enemy tide was held in check. "They're underestimating us," he said. "They always do." But his eyes met Watson's across the holographic battlefield, knowing that arrogance could be their downfall too. The fight transformed Watson. The gruff, boots-on-the-ground soldier was now a strategist forced to fight on a galactic scale. He pored over Xylari data dumps, learning enemy fleet movements, deciphering Prekun command structures. The brutality he'd witnessed on Relixis was now a cold equation to be solved, every cruelty translated into a potential tactical weakness. Sleep became a luxury, his dreams haunted by burning cities and the weight of command. The Coalition's victories were as much technological as strategic. Xylari cyber warfare crippled Prekun supply lines, throwing their logistical might into disarray. Old Earth warships, once museum pieces, were resurrected, refitted with jury-rigged Breathari tech and alien weaponry. Every successful raid fed the beast salvage Prekun armor was reverse-engineered, their bioengineered monstrosities dissected for exploitable flaws. Yet, the war ground on. Each liberated world revealed fresh horrors, brainwashed slave armies, species driven to the brink of extinction. Watson's determination solidified into something colder, bordering on ruthlessness. He began authorizing high-risk gambits, sacrificing pawns to take queens, tactics he would have once abhorred. Davies saw the change in his protege, the haunted soldier now mirroring the calculating gaze of the old admiral himself. A Prekun counteroffensive, intel was sparse. The Xylari were being outplayed in the digital realm, their usual information advantage blunted. Then came scattered reports of a massive fleet buildup in the Corvantis sector. A trap, likely, but one they would have to spring. Aboard the Invincible, the mood was a far cry from the early bravado. This was the seasoned heart of the Coalition veterans of 100 skirmishes, bearing the scars of those victories. Davies's address to the assembled forces was measured, devoid of heroics. "They want a decisive battle," he said, his gaze sweeping over humans, Breathari, Volkri, and others. "They want to break us. We'll give them their battle." The Battle of Corvantes would become a legend whispered at the fringes of explored space. It wasn't a clean, tactical engagement, but a brutal brawl where human audacity collided with Precon desperation. The Coalition fleet, a patchwork armada built on shared sacrifice, hammered the Precon head-on, drawing their ire. Meanwhile, Watson's gamble played out. A strike force cloaked with scavenged tech slipped behind enemy lines. Their target wasn't a ship or a base, but a Precon communications hub, the linchpin of their coordination. He led the assault himself, the battle lust of Relixis burning hot beneath his icy command. As the communications hub fell, the Precon armada faltered. Orders went unheard. Reinforcements stumbled blind. It was the crack in the dam, and the Coalition ruthlessly exploited it. Davies, from the bridge of the Invincible, witnessed his disparate forces transform into a singular, relentless machine. The Precon, cornered and confused, finally unleashed their true power. Immense bioweapon creatures, grown in vats and unleashed in the heart of battle, wreaked havoc. Cities burned on a dozen worlds, the Precon accepting apocalyptic losses in an attempt to inflict a mortal wound. In the bloody aftermath of Corvantes, neither side could claim a true victory. The Precon advance was stalled, their aura of invincibility shattered, but the Coalition was grievously wounded, its fragile unity strained to the breaking point. It was then, as both sides licked their wounds, that humanity played its final and most controversial card. In a hidden bunker beneath the ravaged surface of Relixis, humanity's secret weapon stirred. The project, whispered in hushed tones on the bridge of the Invincible, had fueled nightmares far outstripping those left by the scars of battle. Necessity, Davies had murmured, haunted eyes reflecting the flickering lights of the lab, is the mother of monstrous invention. Here the lines blurred. Human scientists labored alongside salvage Precon bioengineers, shackled and muzzled, yet vital. The air was thick with fear and the acrid tang of alien biological experiments. Watson had nearly thrown the lead Xylari geneticist off an airlock after the initial proposal, his revulsion battling the grim pragmatism clawing at his conscience. The result was unnatural. A fusion of Breathari grace, Precon resilience, and human ingenuity pushed to its most terrifying extreme. Prototypes had been unleashed in the desperate last stand on Corvantes. Cybernetically enhanced Breathari infused with Precon's strength, their feline forms now monstrous, driven by a cocktail of stimulants and obedience protocols. They were terrifyingly effective, but unstable. Davies made the call. The war had entered a horrifying new phase. Word of Precon atrocities, worlds burned in reprisal, hardened already calloused hearts. The first batch of revenants, as they came to be known, was deployed not in open battle, but in covert strikes. Guerrilla warfare, terror tactics, the dark mirror of Watson's earlier asymmetrical campaigns. Precon's supply depots were sabotaged, outposts razed, key commanders assassinated, and whispering through the stars went the message, "You reap what you sow." Fear spread like a virus through the Precon ranks. Their slaves became bolder, rebellions flared with renewed intensity. The iron grip began to crack. It was then that the calls for peace emerged, not from the Precon themselves, but from within the Coalition. The Volcri, unnerved by humanity's willingness to fight fire with fire, began lobbying for negotiation. Some former Precon slave species, now armed and vengeful, refused to sit at the same table with their former oppressors. Aboard the Invincible, the arguments raged. Watson, himself sickened by the echoes of his former self in the Revenants, nonetheless stood firm. "We give them an inch. They'll take a light year. Peace means nothing if you're not strong enough to enforce it." Davies was trapped between his ideals and grim necessity. Yet, he'd played the long game before. The Revenants, monstrous as they were, had done their job. The Precon were reeling, and now, perhaps there was a path to ending the war without destroying everyone in the process. Negotiations began, brokered by neutral parties, held on barren moons far from any strategic advantage. The talks were a grotesque spectacle, a clash of ideals and traumas played out across holographic tables. Humanity, hardened by war, pushed for unconditional disarmament of the Precon, reparations, and the dissolution of their vast slave networks. Opposition was fierce, compromises made, and then immediately retracted. Watson was kept away, his presence seen as provocative. Yet his influence seeped through, a ghost haunting every attempt at reconciliation. Davies, his strategist instincts in overdrive, had calculated the precise turning point, and it wasn't determined on any negotiation floor. News broke across the galaxy. A Preccan slave revolt had stormed a key industrial sector. But this wasn't a desperate act of defiance. Leading the charge were the Revenants, their implanted protocols subverted by the Zalari, turned against their original makers. It was a wildfire tearing through the Preccan Empire. Faced with internal collapse, concessions at the peace talks came swiftly. The armistice was signed amidst a galaxy holding its breath. The Preccan were hobbled, not destroyed. Dissent ran deep within the coalition. Many saw the Revenants as a horrifying sign of humanity's capacity for darkness, a grim testament that in saving others, they had endangered something vital within themselves. Yet, the war was over. Refugees streamed home. Systems began to rebuild. The Invincible, now a beacon of a very different kind of heroism, cruised the borders, enforcing the hard-won peace. And in the shadows, the debate raged on. What price had they paid for victory? And would it be too high in the end? Colonel Watson, his body a network of scars and cybernetics, requested a transfer. He led a task force deep into the unknown regions, hunting Preccan holdouts, chasing ghosts from the war. Some say it was penance, others in exile. But on star charts, out on the bleeding edge of explored space, a new name slowly seeped into whispers. The Watchers. It was a testament to humanity's new grim role in the cosmos. Forever wary, forever ready, forever bearing the burden of a war won through the most terrible of means. Decades passed, an eye-blink in galactic time. The scars of the Preccan War faded, its horrors recounted in hushed whispers among the generations born amidst the uneasy peace. The Invincible, a relic of another age, now served as a mobile headquarters and academy, training a new breed of peacekeepers from across the coalition. Admiral Davies was a gray ghost, his eyes still sharp but weary. The burden of his choices weighed heavy. Yet, out of necessity and desperation, a fragile galactic order had been forged. The coalition held, shifting and reforming, bound by grudging respect and a shared fear of what lurked in the unexplored cosmos. Colonel Watson never returned. Reports of the Watchers were contradictory saviors on one world, boogeymen on another. He had become legend, a symbol of both humanity's unwavering resolve and the dark path it had walked. Davies received occasional data bursts, comms relayed through complex Xylari channels, bearing Watson's clipped reports and warnings of emerging threats. The lines between hunter and hunted had blurred beyond recognition. Humanity was forever changed. The old Earth hunger for the stars had been tempered by the realities of interstellar conflict. Expansion was now cautious, measured. The Revenant program was officially terminated, its horrifying results locked away. Yet, rumors persisted. Secret labs, whispered experiments, the continued drive to forge weapons to match the terrors they had already faced. A new generation grew restless. The children of heroes raised on stories of defiance against galactic oppressors, chafed at the constraints of the hard-won peace. They saw not the Preccan specter, but the untapped potential of the galaxy ripe for exploration, exploitation, perhaps even conquest. The old guard, Davies and his allies, clung to the uneasy status quo, their warnings dismissed as the ramblings of war-scarred men. The crisis, when it came, was not a Preccan resurgence. It erupted from the forgotten fringes, a hive-mind insectoid race known as the Scourge, sweeping outwards from the galactic edge, consuming entire systems before the coalition could react. Old alliances strained as fear once again outweighed unity. Panic reigned, echoing the desperate days of the early Preccan incursions. Then, a transmission pierced the chaos, a ghost signal bearing the sigil of the Watchers. It was Watson, his voice rough, strained, decades of hard living audible in each syllable. The data packet was staggering. Scourge fleet movements, high vulnerabilities, ruthlessly pragmatic tactics based on years of fighting the unstoppable. It was humanity's moment to repay the debt. Old ships, mothballed relics of the Preccan War, were recommissioned. Scientists, driven by desperation, dared to dabble in the shadowed corners of technology, echoing the risky experiments that had spawned the Revenants. And in the cold depths of hearts, a terrible resolve ignited. They would save the coalition, and perhaps in saving them, save something of themselves too. The Battle of Tyrannus would be etched in galactic history. Veteran Volcree admirals hesitantly deployed alongside human fleet formations inspired by Watson's brutal data. Zelari cyber warfare, pushed to its breaking limits, held the Scourge at bay just long enough. And on the front lines, a new breed of soldier fought. Not the terrified volunteers of Relixis, but hardened professionals, grimly aware of the compromises they had inherited. The cost of victory was appalling, yet the Scourge advance was halted, their seemingly inexorable tide pushed back. As the coalition regrouped, licking its wounds, a single figure emerged from the shadows to stand before the assembled council. It was Watson, older, bearing a prosthetic where an arm had been, his eyes blazing beneath a face webbed with scars. He was not cheered, but met with stunned silence. In his hand was a control node scavenged from a Scourge Hive queen. "We can adapt this, not to control." He paused, a flicker of revulsion crossing his face. "But to disrupt, jam their communications. They fight as one mind. We cut that link." The arguments were long and bitter. Yet, in the end, the choice was grimly familiar. Survival at a terrible price. It was Davies, once the idealist, now burdened by decades of impossible decisions, who cast the deciding vote. The galaxy held its breath as the adapted Scourge tech was deployed. For a terrifying moment, the hive mind seemed to swell, then implode in upon itself. Ships went dark as their attack formations crumbled into chaos. The tide had turned. Humanity was once again hailed as saviors. But this time the cheers were muted, the stares wary. They had crossed a line, becoming the very thing they had once fought against. Yet, Davies stared out at the scarred star systems, the faces of the lost flashing before his eyes, and knew, deep in his weary soul, that they'd do it all again in a heartbeat. In the quiet that followed victory, the Invincible became a place of pilgrimage and dread. Young officers studied its battle logs not just for strategy, but for the cautionary tale etched in every casualty list. Whispers of the Watchers grew, now tinged with awe and fear in equal measure. And deep within the bowels of the ship, past the armories and memorial halls, there was a lab sealed with biolosks and genetic codes known only to a select, haunted few, for humanity had learned the most dangerous lesson of all. In a galaxy teeming with threats, where survival was a daily gamble, there were some monsters you could fight, and those you might have to become.